Hi everyone, welcome back to Art of the Part. In this video, we're going to continue on with our bracket exercise case study, and we're going to focus on revision management and updating toolpaths and programs inside of MasterCam. So in the last couple of videos, we took a look at the bracket exercise P1, and we completed first and second operation. And I mentioned in those videos that we had a series of revisions that we had to go through from P1 to P2, and then P2 to P3, because we found out using SOLIDWORKS simulation and FEA studies that the intended load rating that we were trying to apply to P1 and P2 would actually cause those models to break. We eventually ended up at P3, and that would be our final model, and that did pass the FEA study. However, I still wanted to go through this exercise of revision management inside of MasterCam, going from P1 to P2, and then P2 to P3. So I'm going to split this up into two videos. This first video is going to be basic revision management, going from P1 to P2, and the next video is going to be more advanced revision management, going from P2 to P3. So again, this video is just going to be basic revision management. We're going to go from P1 to P2, and the first thing that I want to do is actually look at our blueprints going from P1 to P2. So I already have those documents open up here in the background, and I'm going to open up the bracket exercise P1 blueprint right here. You can see that down here in the title block, and if we look in the top right hand corner, we can see that we have a revision table, and we currently only have one revision for the P1, and that's going to be revision A, and that is the part has been released for production. So if I look at the second blueprint for P2, we can actually see, again, we have bracket exercise P2 down here in the title block, but up here in the top right-hand corner, we have moved from revision A to revision B. And revision B notates that we've added ribs for strength per testing. And if you look down here in the top view, you can actually see that there is a green B call out here that are calling out these two ribs that are related to the revision table. So you can see that we have these two ribs in P2, and if we look at P1, we don't have any ribs here in this main pocket. Now, one thing that I want to mention as we look at these two blueprints is the only thing that has changed is those two ribs in the center pocket. The critical dimensions throughout the part have not changed. So for example, the total height of the part is 0.625. The first step is actually going down a value of 0.125. And the step here from the bottom surface, or in this case the top surface, to this top surface is a 1/2 inch. And then we also have radii here that are 2 inches for this arc on the outside contour, as well as a distance of 2 inches between these two 250 holes, and then a distance of 2 inches from the 250 holes up here to the 1/2 inch hole. So if we look at the bracket exercise P2 blueprint, none of those critical dimensions have changed, so the overall footprint of the part is exactly the same. The only thing that has changed here are these ribs. So that being said, I'm going to move back over here into MasterCam, and we're going to start to look at where we left off in the last couple of videos when we finished up the first and the second operation for the bracket exercise P1. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually turn off or toggle off the visibility for my toolpaths, because I currently still have that stock model from the first operation for P1. So here inside a second operation, I'm going to toggle off my toolpaths just by clicking on these four little waves here. It's the second icon on the second row above the operations manager. And then I can see here that I have my soft draws, my work holding assembly, and then the backside of my bracket exercise for P1. The second thing that I'm going to do is actually move over here to my planes in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm currently working on the second op top, and I'm going to then reorientate myself to the first op top. So I'm going to change my WCS, my C, and my T. And right now I'm just going to then reorientate my part and go to the isometric view for the first op top. So I'll right click out here in the viewport, and then from the drop down menu I'm going to select isometric. And then again, it's very hard or very difficult to see the top side of my P1, or in this case we want to bring in P2, so I won't really be able to see first operation unless I turn off my work holding assembly, which includes those soft draws. So again, I'm just going to move down here into my tabs, and then I'm going to click on the levels tab, and then inside the levels tab I'm just going to turn off my work holding assembly. So that is my third level right here, and again, that's why it's advantageous to place all of your work holding components on one single level, so I don't have to click multiple times going through all of these different components. So I'm just going to click once on my work holding assembly here, and you can see that we're left here with our 3D model for the bracket exercise P1. And again, this is P1. We can see that there are no ribs, and we have this big pocket in the center of our model. So what we're going to do now is actually create a new level for the P2 revision. So in the top left-hand corner inside of our Levels tab, we're going to click on that green plus button, and we're going to add a new level, and we're going to title this P2. So I'm going to double-click on this level here. I'll title that P2. And in the theory, or in the spirit of staying organized, I'm actually going to rename the first level to P1 because this is actually going to be that P1 3D model. And if I click on that P1 the first level, I'm going to just double click on this and rename it to P1. Okay, so just make sure that you currently are on the P2 level. This is going to be our 4th level because we're going to follow this exact same workflow where we're trying to merge in new components into this MasterCam part file here. So up in the top left-hand corner, we're actually going to go to File, and from the File drop-down menu here, we're going to look for the Merge command. So before we were trying to merge in an entire work holding assembly, this time we're just going to merge in one new revision. So we're just going to click on Merge, and this is going to bring us to our 3D models. We have P1, P2, and P3. Again, in this video, we're just going from P1 to P2. So I'm going to click on my P2 model right here, click that, and then from the bottom right-hand corner, I will click on Open. So this is why it's important, in my opinion, to have all of your part models referenced from the same origin, because as we start to bring in these multiple different components, you can see that we're just dropping it right on top of where P1 was located. So I don't have to do any of these dynamic translations like we did before with the work holding assembly when we brought in the soft jaws. So in this instance, we do not have to move this around using any of these translation commands. However, one thing that I want you to just double check, just like what we did for the work holding assembly, is that you want to make sure that your levels are currently set to active level. Because we created that P2 level, we want to make sure that this part is being dropped on the P2 level. So we'll hit the green check mark. And once again, I don't know why, this is just like a little glitch that happens in a MasterCam when you're importing or merging parts from SOLIDWORKS, or maybe this is just happening inside of MasterCam educational versions, but it always ends up creating this secondary level that has no entities on it, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. So I'll right-click on this Fillet to level here, and from the drop-down menu, when I right-click on it, I'm just going to clear empty levels, and I'm just going to click on Selected, and that's going to remove it from my levels list, and then you can see that we only have 4 levels. We have P1, the wireframe stock, work holding, and then P2. So I'm actually going to toggle my current active level over here to the wireframe stock, and that way I can show you that I can toggle on and off my P1 and P2, and you can see those two revisions. So if I turn off P2 here, you can actually see that the edge lines for that pocket have disappeared, but if I turn P1 back on and then I turn P2 off, you can see that these ribs have been removed from this 3D model. So we actually have 2 separate 3D models that are inside of this part file right now. So what I'm going to do is actually just turn on or toggle on my P2, and I'm actually going to toggle off my P1. So again, to turn this off, we're just going to hit this little X button underneath the visible column. So I'll click on the X right here, and then we're going to start to process this workflow of basically appending this new part into this model and then actually reassociating some of the toolpath and the program to this new model. So we're going to move back over here into the bottom left-hand corner, and we're going to go back into our toolpaths tab. And the thing that I like to do whenever I'm going through this revision management process is just to cycle through my toolpaths for this operation, just to make sure that maybe I don't have to create new toolpaths and I can use the existing ones. And then if there's something that does come up, I will go ahead and change that. So we'll go ahead and cycle through these. I'll click on the first toolpath here. This is going to be the facing mill. And again, none of these critical dimensions have changed for the outside profile, whether it be the height or the total contour. So in theory, this face mill should be exactly the same. We do not have to update this, even though that it's still tied to the P1 model. If you wanted to, you could reassociate all these selections, but I think in this instance, it's a simple enough toolpath where we really don't have to change it. So we'll move down here. We're going to say that this facing operation is good. We're going to go into the second toolpath operation. And again, this is a roughing, and then the third is a finishing for the contour. So I'm going to say that operations 2 and 3, those are going to be good as well. We do not have to update those because the critical dimensions of that outside contour profile did not change at all going from P1 to P2. The same can be said here for this roughing and finishing operation for the first step, going from the top edge to this step right there. So this was going to be the roughing operation, and we were trying to avoid these diameters here. And then again, we're going to go down here into the fifth toolpath, and this was that area mill for the finishing operation. And again, this all should be exactly the same going from P1 to P2. However, as we start to move into the sixth and seventh toolpath, this is where problems are going to start to arise. So we can clearly see that the sixth and the seventh toolpath are still linked to that P1 model, and we are actually cutting through these ribs with this pocket selection, which isn't necessarily wrong. It's still just linked to that first revision, that bracket exercise P1. We just need to re-update or reassociate this to the new geometry that's been updated in P2. So inside of the sixth toolpath here, we are actually going to open or expand this out, and I'm just going to double click on the parameter selection right here. So click on parameters. This is going to open up our parameters window, and really the only thing that we have to change here is we have to update our automatic regions. So before we clicked on automatic regions, we just clicked on the face of that pocket there, and we're just going to reselect this. So I'm going to remove the automatic region selection that we did previously for the bracket exercise P1, and I'm just going to click on this icon right here. It's a mouse with a circle and a cross through it, so we'll remove that, and that's actually going to remove that selection right there, and we're going to repopulate this with a new selection. So we're just going to click on this select automatic regions, this little mouse button right here. And again, you just want to make sure that you're currently in the solid chaining window. We do not want to be in the wireframe chaining window. So be inside of solids, and then the only option that we can really select right now is faces. So we're just going to re-update this and select these new 3 faces that have been created for P2. So I'm just going to reorientate my model a little bit and make it easier to select. So we'll click on this face, and this face, and then we'll hit the green check mark. So now we've updated this automatic regions with a new selection that are going to be these 3 pockets. So in theory, if I hit the green check mark, this is going to be the exact same toolpath that we were trying to generate before. Now it's just being separated into 3 pockets instead of 1, and we can just use the exact same tool, the exact same approach, so on and so forth. So let's hit the green check mark and see what happens. And we can see that we've now reassociated that toolpath to these 3 pockets. However, the only thing that I'm really not pleased with right now are the 2 smaller pockets, and we're almost doing this ramping helix motion all the way through, and we're not separating this into depth cuts like we are doing with this main bigger pocket right here. So what I would want to do to maybe troubleshoot this is to actually go back up here into my parameters for that 6th toolpath, and to actually look at my entry motion, which is going to be located right here beneath linking parameters. So if we click on entry motion, I told you that a good rule of thumb is that if we take the diameter of the tool and we divide that by 2, we should be able to get a pretty decent helix radius. Now, this isn't necessarily wrong, because if I look at my tool, we are currently using a 312 end mill. If we divide that by 2, we should get a value of 0.156. So in theory, this entry motion is pretty good. It should be good. However, we sometimes are limited by the size of the tool and how we can enter those pockets. So sometimes you actually need to go smaller than that rule of thumb number. So in this instance, I'm just going to update this helix radius to a blanket value of 0.0625. So we're just going to that smaller value, again, 60 thousandths, 0.0625, and we'll see what happens. And we'll hit the green check mark. And you can see that that updated pretty well. So now we have those entry motion helixes for both of those smaller pockets, and now we can clearly see that we have those depth cuts that match the larger pocket here in the middle. So one thing that I want to mention as you start to update that entry motion helix radius value, that 62 thousandths that we just updated, is you probably would want to go back and increase that value incrementally until this toolpath will no longer generate the way that you want it to. In this case, bigger is going to be better. You want to have a bigger swing for the tool to enter into this pocket. However, we are limited by the size of these smaller pockets, so you could do one of 2 things. You could leave it at this value and try to step step it up, or you could actually split these cuts into their own pockets. So with this pocket here, you could leave it as big as you want, and these two smaller pockets, you could separate those and you could have a smaller entry motion for that helix radius. However, I'm just going to leave it at that 62 thousandths. You can actually update it if you want it to, but we're just going to go ahead and move on into our seventh toolpath, which is going to be the finishing operation for all three of these pockets. So if I click on this seventh toolpath here, this is going to be that pocket toolpath. We can see that it's still linked back to that bracket exercise P1 3D model where we have one big pocket in the center here. Again, not necessarily wrong, it's just still linked to that old revision. So we're just going to follow this exact same workflow where we're going to investigate the parameters and just update our selections for the toolpath to generate. So inside of the seventh toolpath for the pocket, I'm going to open or expand that out, and I'm just going to double click on the parameters here for that seventh toolpath. And then again, we're going to go up here to the toolpath type, and then we have our chain geometry on the right hand side here, and we are just going to remove the selected change just like we did before. It's going to be that mouse button with the circle and the cross through it. So I'm just going to click on that remove selected chains, and now I'm just going to update it with new selected chains. So we're going to click on this mouse button right here. And again, we just want to make sure that we are selecting here inside of the 3D solids chaining, and then we just want to have the face selection turned on. So we're just going to repopulate this again with these three faces at the bottom of the pocket. So I'll click on 1, 2, and 3. Now, one thing I want to mention again too, since we do have more options to update this with the pocket selection for solid chaining, if you are going to select loops, you just want to make sure that all of your loops are running counterclockwise, because again, everything is going to be reversed when you're doing internal pockets versus external contours. However, when you're using the face option and you're using the pocket here, you can just click on any one of these faces. It doesn't matter what the arrow is going to be going. We will actually control that with additional parameter settings in the toolpath parameters. So again, I just selected on those three faces, and we can hit the green check mark here to complete the solid chaining. Now we're just going to follow that exact same workflow that we were using in the previous toolpath, where we just updated the chain geometry and then we hit the green check mark and let this toolpath regenerate. And if we saw anything that was out of place or odd, we went back into the parameters and we updated that individually. So in this instance, again, we're not going to make any changes for the linking parameters going from P1 to P2. All we did was we changed the chain geometry, and we're just going to come down here to the bottom right hand corner and we'll hit the green check mark and see how this toolpath gets regenerated. So we'll hit the green check mark. And again, this looks pretty good because now we have this pocket toolpath separated into three separate pockets as opposed to one large pocket from the P1 revision. So we have a pocket here for the center large pocket here, and then the two smaller ones on the left and the right side. Now, the only thing that really is standing out to me here is inside of this larger pocket in the middle, we do have a helix entry motion, which is probably what we want to see. However, in the two smaller pockets, we really don't see that entry helix motion. And this might be an instance where you would probably want to go back and maybe separate these pocket toolpaths into their own individual pieces of geometry. So we might have 2 or 3 pocket toolpaths, one for the larger middle pocket and then maybe 1 or 2 for the 2 smaller pockets. However, this is just going to be a finishing operation. We already removed all this material with the roughing operation from the previous toolpath with that 2D dynamic mill. So in this case, I could probably just turn off this helix entry motion and just rely on our lead in and lead out, because we're just cutting away 5 thousandths from the floor and the wall. So if we go back into the parameters of the 7th toolpath here, I'm just going to go into my entry motion, which is located right beneath my roughing section. So if you go and click on entry motion, in this instance, you could try to play around with the minimum radius. However, I have a feeling that this will not update the way that we want it to. So in this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off because we're just going to rely on this lead in and lead out. And we can see that we are doing these tangent lead ins and leads outs by default. So this is going to lead into that final pass cut with no issues. So in this instance, again, we are just going back in and we are turning off the entry motion, and we'll hit the green check mark. And again, this looks really great. We've now updated this toolpath going from P1 to P2, and it just took a couple clicks. So as we go through the rest of these toolpaths, going from 8 and 9, these are just going to be drilling operations. So we really have nothing left to update inside of this P2 revision. All we did was we kept the toolpaths for 1 through 5, and we left them all the same. They were all the exact same selections and chains because they had the same critical dimensions from P1, and the only thing that changed from P1 to P2 was the center pocket here, and we updated the 2 toolpaths that related to that, which is the roughing and then the finishing pocket details. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize the 6th and the 7th toolpath, and then I'll just click on the entire first operation here, and then I'll just zoom out a little bit, and then when I have this entire first operation selected, I will go ahead and select on my verified selected operations to see if this matches up to my new P2 model. So I'll click on verify selected operations, and then I will let this run. And this again is a very important reason why we probably want to have our fixtures separated into separate levels, because right now I can have my fixture which is obscuring my entire first operation, and I can just go ahead and toggle my fixture off and I don't have to worry about it. So again, we have our P2 revision running here in verify. I will just slow this down just a little bit and we'll hit play. So again, we have our face mill, we have our outside roughing and finishing for the contour, and then we have that roughing and finishing for that first step, and now we just have the roughing and the finishing here for these pockets. And I already have my workpiece turned on from before, but you can see that there is no difference, there are no deviations going from P1 to P2, and here in P2 we have the exact same results from verify as the provided 3D model. So this looks great. This update, this is a very simple update. All we did was we made a couple changes in the existing toolpath. And then if we go to the second operation here, I'm just going to back out here from verify. And then I'm just going to run into my second operation. In second op, you can see that we have the stock model. It hasn't been updated because we did make changes from the toolpath that was referenced for that. So this stock model was referencing the entire first operation toolpath group. So right now this is missing a link. It is recognizing that toolpath has been updated and needs to be updated for the stock model. So if you ever see one of these little symbols where there's an X over the icon of your toolpath, that means that the operation has been turned to what we call dirty. It's a dirty op, and we just need to regenerate or rebuild that dirty op. So the only thing that we have to do really is just click on that stock model or click on that toolpath, and then up here in the operations manager right beneath toolpath, we're going to go ahead and find the third icon in the first row. So again, this is going to be the third icon in the first row. It's going to be a spindle with a collet and tool hanging out, and there's going to be a little green play button next to it. So if you click on that, that's going to be regenerate selected operations, and that's going to rebuild that dirty op. And you can see that it's rebuilding right there. And now we have a new stock model that is going to be related to those cuts that we just made, or those cuts that we just updated with the toolpaths for the pockets here from P2. So in this case, I would say that second operation probably doesn't need any other updating. We can see what it looks like when we run it and verify. I'm just going to run down here into my planes, and I will reassociate myself to the WCS CNT for that second op top. I'll go over here to the viewport, right click, and from the drop down menu, I'm going to select isometric. And again, here I'm looking at the second op top. I'll jump back over here into my levels. And inside of my levels, I will just turn on my work holding once again, and this looks like it's all matching up. And we'll just go over here into my toolpaths, and inside of toolpaths, I'll just select my entire second op, and then once again, we'll just run this and verify and see what this looks like. So if we click on this verify selected operations, this is going to open up your verify window here. And like I said before, it's very important that you're separating your levels or your work holding into its own fixture level here. So if we click on fixtures, we can toggle that back on, and then we can run the play button here for second op. And again, this should be the exact same toolpath going from P1 to P2 because we have the same origin and we haven't made any changes to our critical dimensions. So as we're going from first operation into second operation and we're flipping this part over in the machine, especially in this revision management process going from P1 to P2, the part should be sticking out past the top surface of those soft draws the exact same value. So we don't have to really make any other changes in this op2 for P2. So I'm just going to go ahead and back out of verify. This all looks good to me, and return back to the MasterCam window. And as far as updating this for revision management going from P1 to P2 and updating op1 and op2, this is all good to go. So I'm just going to come up here to the top left-hand corner and make sure that you're not saving over the part because you don't want to remove your P1 revision. We're just actually going to go to File, and from this drop-down menu, you're going to choose Save As, and you're going to save this as bracket exercise P2. So once you save your file, this should complete the simple revision management inside of MasterCam using the bracket exercise case study going from P1 to P2. Now, I hope you can gain an appreciation for all the work we put into the last couple of videos, making sure that our parts are in the same origin, making sure that our components are on the correct levels, and then making sure that our toolpaths are in the right order and then separated into their own toolpath groups going from first operation to second operation. Because there's a lot of value in staying organized and being efficient. And in industry, you're probably not going to get the part right on the first time. You are going to have to go through some kind of revision management. So instead of doubling or tripling our work going from P1 to P2 to P3, we're able to kind of streamline this and simplify this into a couple clicks. So I hope you can get an appreciation for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll go ahead and catch you in the next one. Bye.